Hey everyone, Dan here. We are about an hour after market close on Tuesday, August 3rd. We're going to take our daily look at SoFi. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as trading or investment advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. All right, so SoFi had a pretty brutal retracement down again today on slightly higher volume than we've seen the last few days. That's sort of the first thing that I want to talk about. And just to kind of lay the groundwork for today's video, I'm going to stay like 95% focused on the chart, try to keep it relatively to the point, and then just a really quick check on a couple of data points, just because I see them coming up a lot and just want to set the record straight. And then we'll leave the other stuff. There's been a lot of sort of info, data, news heavy SoFi videos lately, and I know that that can be a lot. And there's going to be more coming up because there's going to be another earnings video that I'm going to put out. There's going to be another competitive landscape video I'm going to put out, as well as bank charter video. So there's more of those to come. So today I think it makes sense to keep it relatively chart focused. So yeah, kicking things off with the volume, I've been talking for several days or weeks now, I don't know, about the volume needing to pick up on the buy side. And what we see today is volume overcoming the volume that we've seen the last couple of days, but of course coming through as sell volume. So we're still seeing this really lopsided sell volume coming through as opposed to buy volume. And there's just the reality there that the buy volume has to come in if there's any hope for clawing back to even that 1664 level, for example, for SoFi. But for now, we're just seeing this kind of like M-shaped pattern where it's just kind of up, down, up, down. And even then, to that, we do see this downward pressure coming through not only from, well, we'll zoom in and take a look at it. Let's take a look at that on here. So we see this downward pressure coming in since this, I mean, I'm going to call this a peak high, in the scope of this chart. I mean, it stretches back to here a little bit too, but you see this, I'm not going to draw it in because there's enough on the chart, but you see this down trend line that's forming here that these peaks aren't even reaching up to at this point. And this most recent peak, which happened in the pre-market today, wasn't even able to pierce really into that white box in any meaningful way, shape, or form. Definitely wasn't able to make an attempt at this green uptrend line that we had charted in yesterday's video, right? So instead, what we're seeing is kind of an extension of this downtrend line. This is often what we see. Seen this in several tickers. I think this was even a component of the Twitter video that I just did, but we see this all the time where there's this downtrend line where it keeps making lower highs and it gets stuck under there and then it punches through. And then when it makes an attempt to go up, it just comes back and starts laying on top of that previous downtrend line. So now it's treating it as like down support. It's a weird way to put it, but it's a support line that is dragging the stock downward by it maintaining that support, if that makes sense. So it just means that instead of being underneath it, being trapped underneath it, it's just laying on top of it. And it has the same effect, right? It's just dragging the stock down further and further and further. And, this is why in last night's video, I had mentioned that it was kind of unfortunate that we had retraced back down to this red box when my big hope was that this red box would hold. This 1574 to 1572 is a very tight zone, right? It's just a very little area. But that's the zone that I was looking for it to hold. And what I had mentioned in last night's video was my worry was that if it couldn't hold, that we'd have a pretty catastrophic, I think might have been the word that I used. I could be, I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly at all, but it could be a pretty significant drop. And that's obviously what we saw. Now, if we want to zoom back out, what I think it would behoove us to do at this point is to recalibrate ourselves to this zone, which I know that nobody wants to do. But this purple bounce zone, I'm going to drag this over here and put this so that we have this for the next few days. Now, as you know, I have positioned my positions. I've taken positions in various accounts with the look toward or the hope that SoFi had potential for a pre-run or run-up to earnings. And I'm still along that mindset. By tomorrow will be 8 days to earnings. There's still plenty of time for things to pick up. There's still plenty of time for a pre-run, a pre-earnings run to kick off. But obviously, this is not the most hopeful situation at the moment. Now, a couple of things to look at. You have obviously these downtrends that SoFi is stuck with, this uptrend that I would love to see it test at this point, but it is approaching this purple bounce zone, which hasn't let us down so far. So we'll see. And then sitting underneath it is that 1465 demand zone that we've seen play out previously. And I mean, the only other slight bit of hope that we see here is if it can kind of cut itself off around this purple box, this might be the last time we need to dip into the purple box if this uptrend can hold. I don't even know what color to make this thing. Let's just make it purple also. But if we do see low and then retraced slightly higher low, and now if we can get a bounce off of that here, maybe this is the last time that we have to return to this box, which if we don't return to this box anymore, that keeps us out of the 14s at least. And I know this isn't like the most, I don't know, rah-rah enthusiastic place for us to be, but it's where we are. It's a long life cycle that's ahead of SoFi, I think, with many more things ahead of it than behind it, and many more things kind of to come than are currently going for it, right? Right now it's trapped with a bunch of FUD in various areas, SPAC, growth, seemingly big wins for other fintech companies that could be keeping SoFi on the back burner, an unknown with regards to what's coming up for earnings, still a relatively small impact on the overall industry or spaces in which it does compete. That's setting aside all of the grand vision and all of the places where it wants to be. But even the places where it is, it's very low touch at this point, right? It's like 2.25 million members that they boasted, right, in the last report just before the merger. And that was seen as a big win. And that's great, but that still is a ridiculously small number. Now, that said, that's one of the reasons that I'm very bullish on SoFi. That's a long-term bullish thing. These short-term things, we just don't have much control over. There's a lot of different factors in play. There's the lockup and the selling pressure that creates. There's these things like earnings. There's news cycles like, folks getting super excited about Square and Afterpay and those sorts of things. So these things are just kind of largely out of control of day-to-day retail investors. So just kind of keep that in mind. And long term, again, I still think it's on SoFi. They are the kind of captains of their own ship in the sense of either they can execute on the vision that they have or they can't. And that will either make this a really fruitful endeavor and investment, or it will make it a really sad one. But that to me is in SoFi's control. But that is, again, a longer term thing. So, these short term situations are sometimes out of the control directly of the company or the investors. So back to the chart. Sorry for the diatribe, but I think, I'll stretch this over again to 1572 just so we lengthen these out. But this is basically where we're trapped right now, right? It's pretty obvious. We're trapped between this bounce zone and this sort of dangerous red zone. That's why it's red, right? The last time it fell through it here on the 29th, it fell really hard. Now it recovered. Now, so the question is, can SoFi recover the next couple of days? That has been the trend, right? Huge downturn. Gets caught by this purple box, purple uptrend. Couple of days recovery. Big push down. Couple of days recovery. Big push down. Now, The other thing that's sort of unfortunate to me is that this push down today is quite a bit lower than the push down that we saw from I guess end of day on the 29th. So that's not a great sign either. It's obviously making a lower low in that direction. So we're just going to have to keep an eye and see if this purple box can continue to be the savior that it has been previously. Now I want to zoom back out to the daily because we've been keeping an eye on the indicators from the daily perspective. So let's do that just to kind of do our due diligence. Now the MACD kind of flattening out here a little bit, and it hasn't made much of a rumble. And the MACD curling in a little bit, so sort of like just kind of posturing up to the signal line. It's not really making a move toward it, though the real estate is closing a little bit, but it's not really like curling in toward it. It's just sort of like adjusting itself from running more perpendicular to it to more parallel. And so where it's going to position itself from here, the rest of the week will sort of lay the groundwork for that. And we'll see. But obviously my hope is we can continue to push up because we're still sitting well below the baseline with a bunch of opportunity to run if we can get there. But there's a bunch of these things just sort of standing in SoFi's way at the moment. Now on the RSI side of things, curling back down, we're very, very close to oversold still. Not even really able to make much headway into the 40s, much less take a look at the midline. I mean, the midline is way up here, which feels very far away since it lost the midline, which is way back here on 624. It hasn't been able to even touch it since then. So that's sort of just like the trap that we are caught under at the moment. Now the MAs, as you would imagine, all in a bearish formation, kind of knocking its head on the 20 MA, which we've seen it do previously. We saw it do that back here and sort of get trapped underneath for the last 4 days on the 20. And it really needs to, again, flip to getting support over the 20, which we've seen previously can really carry it up through some of these big pushes. All of those big pushes have occurred right after establishing price action over the 20. And so to me, that's sort of an indication of just sort of what's going to be needed in order to make it happen. Now, two things that I want to clear up. One, I want to remind everyone that we do still have 3 buys. We now have almost 75% return potential to the upside based on the cumulative price targets or the consensus price targets of those 3 buy ratings. Again, not that analysts are correct, but to the extent to which that can draw in retail and or institutions, we'll let them come in at this point. But there's a lot of upward potential there, and no analysts indicating anything to the contrary yet. Now, the other thing that I still see coming up several different places is where do shorts fall into this? Shorts are not a factor at the moment, and in my opinion, as far as I can tell. This is Ortex. Today, shorts came off over 7%. That said, they're only consuming 1.2% of the free floats by Ortex's estimates. And the utilization rate's tiny, just 8.9% of the shares that could be on loan are lent out at the moment. So to me, it's a non-factor. I mean, you look at short percentage of the free floats, tiny percentages here. I don't even bat an eyelash until I see 10%, and even then, it's sort of more interesting to see it approaching 20. So to me, that's a non-factor, and I'm not too concerned at the moment about shorts. So I'll just put it that way. But I'm just kind of taking it day by day, letting it play out. I still think we have enough time for pre-earnings run if that's able to be put together. That said, the sort of indications that could be kicking off keep getting squashed, and there's just you just got to kind of roll with it. Just do the best that you can. My long-term outlook has not changed, but that was the diatribe that I did earlier, so refer back to that if you want. All right, well, one last thing that two last things I should mention. One, I do see some folks who seem incredibly over leveraged in SoFi. I would just say, not even particular to SoFi, but just always be very cautious with how much of your account you're putting into any single ticker, or even any like duopoly of tickers, because they can turn against you very quickly and can put your account in a pretty rough position. So diversification is a good thing. There's a lot of reasons why most folks are in like ETFs, for example. So just be cautious with your risk. And I would say that too if we were running up on green days as well. I think I've said it on every green day. I've said, don't get overly excited here. This is just a green day, or this is just a couple of green days. So I wouldn't over risk in that situation either. So, if that's the case, it's fine to be bullish and it's fine to be excited about a stock and everything, but that doesn't mean that you need to throw your entire account into it, especially if that account means something to you. It's one thing if you have an account and your mindset is basically, I don't care if I lose all this money, and so I really like this company, or I really like the stock, and I'm going to put everything into it, and if it all goes away, I don't really care. That's one thing. But the balances that I see some of these folks talking about that they have tied up in SoFi, and you can see that it's 100% or it's 92% of their total portfolio and things like that. And it's just, just if that's what you're doing, be very, very certain that you know what you're doing. And then the other thing is, on a completely separate note, I started a series of videos today. I put out the first two. I'm starting an account from just $100. So I put $100 in this Webull account, this is the charting software that you're looking at right now. And what I'm doing is I'm documenting the trades and the decision points day to day, and the ins and outs of how I'm going to trade to grow that account from $100 to whatever we grow it to, and the wins and losses along the way. So far today, the trades that I made, don't pay attention to this. This is nonsense. But I've made about 320, 394, something like that. Whatever. I've made this amount of money. But again, I have almost $20 sitting on the sidelines still, so I've invested about 80, and these are my P&Ls right now. And this SSR Mining is an earnings play. They have earnings coming out tomorrow morning, I think. It's either tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. And this Excella was a low-cost stock that had strong potential for a short squeeze, I thought, and so I jumped into that. But throughout the videos, basically I'm going through how I'm looking for different stocks and the types of plays that I'm looking for. And so doing the quick research on the stocks, then sort of tracking them in real time. Obviously I'm looking at the 1-minute chart for these, for example. So I'm seeing the indicators and the chart patterns and kind of talking through what I like, what I don't like. And then obviously you see when I get to execute taking the position, and then once I exit a position, which will probably be tomorrow, see sort of the decision points that go into exiting the position as well. So if that's interesting to you, just scroll to my videos from today and you'll see the first episode. You might not see the second episode until later tonight, but by say 8 or 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight, both of those episodes will be out. The first one is already out. It came out this afternoon. All right. Well, keep some perspective. Sort of work on your mindsets and where you're framing. A lot of this stuff, I see a bunch of folks getting very down about SoFi, and that's fine. If you need to sit it out for the time being and kind of wait for this to start to come back a little bit, I definitely understand. I've done that a ton of times with a bunch of different tickers. So I just say enough is enough. I need to put my capital elsewhere. I need to step away from this one and come back to it with fresh eyes later, and that's totally fine. Maybe you want to wait for it to establish over 17 or over 18 or something before you'll even consider coming back in. And even then, it'll only be if the indicators are looking good, and so on and so forth. So do what you think is best. There's no sort of valor. There's no prize to be won by just stubbornly staying in anything, in my opinion. So, yeah, but do what you think is best for your own situation, of course. All right, well, thanks a bunch for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope that your week is going well, regardless of what you're trading. All right, I will see you in the next video.